I'm Brooke Baldwin, and we continue CNN's special coverage of Ariel Castro's sentencing today, and a frantic 911 call kick-started this entire story and really helped set these three abused, tortured women on the road to freedom. Let me take you back. Here is the voice of Amanda Berry.
I've been kidnapped and I've been missing for 10 years, and I'm here. I'm free now.
Amanda Berry had been missing for about 10 years. Today, a Cleveland police officer described these incredible moments when she realized Berry was not only the only victim here in this home. She found Gina DeJesus and Michelle Knight.
It took me a second to really realize it was her, because she was a lot thinner and pale compared to the pictures you've seen for the last 10 years of her, where she was a little bit heavier, long hair, she had real short hair, and she was real thin and pale. But you could see the resemblance. You knew it was her. But it took it just, that extra second to get a look. Michelle was so tiny, I thought she was a little girl until I put her down and got a look at her and realized she was a grown woman.
There were three grown women and a little girl in that house. And here is Cleveland City Councilman Brian Cummins. Brian, nice to see you again.
Yes.
I was in Cleveland for the happy story, the freedom of these three young women in May, and I was struck by just how big this story, how much it shook Cleveland clearly for years and years, how missing posters were still on telephone poles. I mean, just talk to me about the significance of this day. How huge is this for your city?
It's absolutely huge. I mean, as you mentioned, a decade of vigils and prayers and community efforts and efforts of law enforcement agencies. It's absolutely huge.
Who have you been in contact with? I know, hearing the impact statements from these, family members representing these young women today, they're pleading for privacy, especially Amanda. She has this little girl, and her little girl has no idea that the brevity of this story. Who have you been talking to, and how is everyone?
Well, my role from May 6 onward has primarily been the community. So we've done a lot of referrals to some of the witnesses on the street, et cetera, to mental health specialists. But, I've had primary contact with the attorneys for the survivors, as well as the communications people in the cadre of professionals that have really put up pro bono services to ensure really their future. That's including the Courage Fund that we established, and really kind of in the background of making sure that they're going to be taken care of for the future.
Mm-hmm. And we're starting to see these pictures, the beginning of the end of this home on Seymour Avenue. You and I stood on the same street back in May, and to know that part of this plea deal, this home is coming down. How will that help Cleveland? How will that help this neighborhood move forward?
Well, we know from somewhat, not similar experiences, but some traumatic events in the past within the city that it's really important to really remove this horrible symbol of just abominable brutality, a decade long. For the people that, imagine, people living on the street that actually own property on the street. This is so important to take down the structure and to really develop with the survivors' wishes taken into consideration in the community, to really understand what it's going to take over the next several years to put this behind us. It's going to be difficult.
Brian Cummins, Cleveland City Council, thank you so much for joining us again. We appreciate it. And we will have much more on today's sentencing hearing coming up in about 10 minutes. We'll take a closer look at Michelle Knight's emotional moment in court as she confronted her abductor there, speaking to the judge. We'll ask a psychologist about just the strength it took for her to do this today. But first, breaking news out of the Pentagon, a major announcement, in fact. The U.S. looking to end those controversial drone strikes in Pakistan. This is a huge deal in the fight against terror. Find out who said it and what the timeline would be. Coming up. Today in a Cleveland courtroom, we heard the sentence. We watched this hearing, Ariel Castro getting life plus 1,000 years. And we watched one of his young victims, Michelle Knight, really just pour her heart out to this court. We'll have much more on that in a minute. But first, I just want to take you back to Cleveland, where it all began. I was there in May when the whole story broke that they were free. And I actually walked to the three exact spots where these unsuspecting girls crossed paths with a sexual monster. Here in Cleveland, this is 106th Street and Lorraine Avenue, and this here is the last time anyone saw Michelle Knight. The year was 2002. She was just 21 years old. Fast forward 1 year, 6 blocks away, right here on Lorraine Avenue, and Amanda Berry had just finished her evening shift here at work. This was the eve of her 17th birthday, and she was last seen walking along the street in her Burger King uniform. And then exactly 1 year later, 14-year-old Gina DeJesus is plucked off of the same street here, Lorraine Avenue, where Michelle and Amanda were taken. And we've just come to this corner and just found this. I want to show you. Underneath all of this is a sign that says, "Where is Gina?" This is possibly one of the original missing posters. Down to the details, Georgina DeJesus was last seen wearing a white jacket, sky blue sweater, blue jeans, and a cream shirt. The details of her disappearance down to this very corner, and the reward that was offered. And finally, look at this. A picture of her as a baby and this handwritten note: "This is my baby. Happy birthday, Gina. Love, Mom." And today, now that we know how the story has ended, celebratory balloons and a sign down here: "Thank you, God. Gina is free." It's incredible, and it was incredible just walking there and seeing how he plucked them one after another, different years, all basically within like 4 blocks of one another. And then they suffered 11 years in hell, kidnapped, specifically Michelle Knight here, kidnapped at 20, addressing her captor, Ariel Castro, today in court, saying, "It's your turn now. Your hell is just beginning." Here she was.
"I spent 11 years in hell. Now your hell is just beginning. I will overcome all this that happened, but you will face hell for eternity. From this moment on, I will not let you define me or affect who I am. You will live, I will live on. You will die a little every day. As you think about the 11 years and atrocities you could inflict it on us. What does God think of you hypocritically going to church every Sunday, coming home to torture us? The death penalty will be so much easier. You don't deserve that. You deserve to spend life in prison."
Carol Lieberman, forensic psychiatrist, joins me live from Los Angeles. And Carol, I mean, this young woman spent basically a third of her life as a prisoner in this home, and it's been, what, 3 months since she's been free? How does one summon the strength that we witnessed to be able to speak like that?
It's amazing. I mean, the only thing that can explain it, besides that hopefully she's been getting a lot of therapy since she was found, is the fact that somewhere in the beginnings of her life, there was love coming from someone that gave her this sense of strength in herself. You know, she protected some of the other girls. She took the worst beatings, literally and emotionally, and yet she's able to come out and be so articulate. And so there was something in her, you know, background that gave her that strength. And also what she's doing here is wresting the power away from her captor. He had the power over her for a decade, and by her saying these words, she's taking the power back for herself. Now, whether she believes that 100%, you know, or she's still growing into that, is another thing, but she's certainly on the right path.
And we focused on Michelle Knight because we saw her, you know, physically in court today. But I want to focus on the other 2 survivors, Gina DeJesus and also Amanda Berry. And they weren't in court. They had different representatives from their families. And we saw Amanda Berry's sister. And this is what she said. Let me quote this. Quote, "She, Amanda, has not talked about these things, even with me, and she does not want other people to talk about these things." You know, I think the caveat also being she's the one with a little girl, and little girl has no idea, really, I think, the whole backstory, right, of this entire decade in captivity. But how would one approach this in talking about the 10 years or simply moving on?
No, that's not a good sign. I mean, she really does need to be talking about it, certainly with a therapist first and foremost. It's the hardest in a way, well, for each of them it's hard in a different way, but she has a child by this monster, and that makes it even harder because the child is always a reminder, and of course she loves the child, I'm sure. So, but trying to push it under the rug, not talking about it is the worst thing that someone can do when they've had this kind of trauma.
Carol Lieberman, forensic psychiatrist. Carol, thank you very much. We wish these three women and the little girl well. Thank you. Russia's new anti-gay laws have some calling for a boycott of next year's Winter Olympics in Sochi. Johnny Weir is a decorated American figure skater and is openly gay. Coming up next, we'll talk to him about Russia's new law and calls for athletes to skip the games altogether. And you may be surprised at what he says.